West Aurora. It's Dr. Valerie McCall, and I'm the Director of Educational Equity. And I'm here today at the Black Hawk Cafe with Chef Linda, who's going to be making pretzel rolls with us for today. So I just want to tell you just really quickly a little bit about our Parent Leadership Series. We are bringing this to you as an opportunity for parents to bring families together in the kitchen, not only just to spend time together and time to practice perhaps some of your math skills, time to collaborate, practice following directions, but most of all, time to make memories. So we hope you enjoy today's pretzel rolls with Chef Linda. Take it away, Chef Linda.
Thank you, Dr. McCall. Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Brennan, and I'm the culinary instructor at West High. I run the Black Hawk Cafe. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be focusing on pretzel rolls. Who doesn't like a good pretzel roll? So let's get started. So our first ingredient is yeast. What I want you to know about yeast is that this is a living microorganism. Doesn't mean that it's gonna, jump out at you. It's not living in that respect. However, it can be killed. So our water temperature is very, very important. You need to have it warm enough so that the yeast gets activated, but not so hot that it actually kills it. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my yeast. This is called proofing the yeast. The yeast is basically dormant right now, so the warm water is basically waking it up. So we want it to have a minute to get into that warm water, basically take a little yeast bath and get activated and acclimated to what its job is going to be. You will know that your yeast is working. It is very fragrant. Yeast has a very distinctive smell, so it'll smell, for lack of better description, yeasty. I know that's not very original, but it'll smell yeasty, as well as it'll start to have little bubbles in the water. We want to let that sit aside for just a minute. Let's go over what these are doing. So the yeast is obviously going to be what makes our bread rise. Our milk and our water are going to be our liquid that's going to incorporate all of our dry ingredients. Our butter is two-folds, right? Butter tastes good, so it's obviously going to make our bread taste good. In addition to, anytime you put a fat into bread, it adds a tenderness to the bread. So this is going to give a nice mouth chew to the pretzel rolls. Then we've got our brown sugar. Brown sugar, obvious, right? It's going to add a little sweetness. Our brown sugar is also going to add a little bit of color to our bread, and you'll see towards the end the difference in the color. And then we have our 8 cups of flour. So our flour has a protein in it, it's called gluten, and as soon as we add the liquid to it, the gluten gets activated, and the gluten is what gives bread its structure. So we're going to be kneading this after we get everything together, and the kneading process is going to develop that gluten and give us a nice bread dough, okay? So I've yapped enough. Let's go ahead and start making some bread. So I have an empty bowl here, and I'm just going to take my yeast mixture, and I want to make sure that I get all of the yeast out. So if any of it sticks to your liquid measuring cup, which I have a couple spots here, you want to make sure you get all the yeast in there. It is a measured amount for this particular recipe. All right. And then we just slowly start to add everything. So I'm going to get my milk, my butter, and my brown sugar in here first, and then we'll slowly start to incorporate the flour. So in goes the milk. And again, you just want to take the chill off of the milk, just because we don't want it to be super cold and then it makes the yeast mixture cold. We want that yeast mixture to stay nice and warm. All right, when we're done, the dough should actually still have a little bit of warmth to it. And in goes our butter. And I just melted it. You want it melted again. You don't want it scorching hot. We don't want to kill our yeast mixture off. Give this a little mix, and then we're going to add our brown sugar and do a mix as well. This is our only chance really to dissolve the brown sugar into our dough. So take a minute and make sure you're stirring and really incorporating it. If you have big chunks of brown sugar, which mine's been sitting out for a little while, it's dry out. If I have those big chunks, when I start to add the flour, I'm gonna end up with big chunks of brown sugar in my bread, and that's not really what you want. So I've got a little brown mixture here going, and I'm going to slowly start to incorporate my 8 cups of flour. After making this so many times, my biggest hint or tip would be don't add all the flour. Okay, depending on what time of year you're cooking and where you store your flour, it's very dry out right now. So the flour, if you're storing it at room temperature, could be very dry. And what that means is that your proportions of how much flour you're going to need can vary. Summer, it's very humid, so there might be a lot more moisture in the flour, and you might not need as much. So slowly add it. As you make this, you'll know what the dough is supposed to feel like, and you can make those changes. I'd like to say it's an exact science, but it really isn't. There is a little bit of know-how with this. So I made a batch earlier today. I used all the flour, but I'm not going to assume that that's all, the same thing's going to happen. So I'm going to add about half, because I know I'm going to at least use that much, and start to stir and incorporate and get that in. And then that also allows the liquid to start to absorb the flour. If by chance you had a child that was too anxious and dumped all the flour and your dough looks dry, don't panic. Keep working it, keep stirring it. You'll be surprised how much that dough can absorb. It just needs a little bit of time. So I just prefer to do a little flour as we go and let it absorb. I had a group of kids that made some dough earlier this week, and they were very anxious and poured the whole thing in. Their dough was fine, but it did take a little bit of working it in. It did make them panic a little bit, but the dough did eventually absorb all of that. So I've got kind of a clumpy mixture. I'm going to add probably another half of that and hold back maybe about 2 cups. And we're going to stir. And so now that the liquid is interacting with the flour, now gluten is starting to develop. And again, this is what is going to give our bread the structure that we need for it to be bread. So I'm starting to form a dough here, right? But I can tell that it's still pretty sticky. So I'm not going to stick my hands in that because I don't want the dough to be stuck all over my fingers. So you want to wait until the dough no longer sticks to the bowl to start kneading. When you are kneading, the dough should not be all gooped in your fingers, all right? You knead with the palm of your hand. So I'm just going to work in a little bit more of this flour. And as we work the dough and start kneading, you're going to feel the softness, I guess, disappear. So it's going to start off being very, very pillowy, and then as we knead and develop that gluten, it's going to become firmer. All right. So mine looks like it's not going to stick. So now I'm going to switch to my hand. I prefer to knead in the bowl that I'm making the bread in, for 2 reasons. One, I just find it easier to be able to tip the bowl and manipulate the dough. And 2, no mess on the counters. So this bowl is a lot easier to clean up. All right, so we're gonna start working this. And again, with the palm of your hand, it's a full push turn. And it's okay if you get a little bit stuck to your hand, but it shouldn't be like glumpy. I don't know if that's a real word, but. And then once the dough is making you kind of sweat a little bit, then you can test it. So there's 2 ways to test dough. And it's funny because we just made dough today with the kids. We made a pizza dough. So I feel like I'm saying this for the 15th time today, but there are 2 ways that you can test the dough. There's my way, and then there's the other teacher's way. So what you're going to do is you're just going to use the finger test. So if you push this and the dough bounces back pretty quickly, it's kneaded enough, all right? So that one, it just tests, if you've developed the gluten enough, it springs back. So you just do the test. If it springs back, which mine's just about there, I might need for a couple more minutes, 1 more minute. And then there's also the window pane test, which I'm not good at, which is why I don't do it. But you can take a little piece and you stretch it out, and if it doesn't rip, I don't usually do that one. But you can do the window pane. Mine just ripped. You can tell that it's not totally ready to be done yet. All right, so a couple more here, and we are ready to go. And so you're left with a nice soft dough, all right? Mine might look a little bit bigger than the one you guys are making because I'm now just realizing that I believe I made a double batch. You guys are gonna be making a single batch. If you wanted to double, you're gonna get quite a few out of these. So at this point, you're gonna let this rise, right? Because we had yeast in here, we want this dough to basically double in size. If you cover it with a towel and put it in the warmest area, usually that's sitting on the stove, takes about half hour, 45 minutes or so. You're gonna let this rise. If you don't have the time, you certainly could put it in the refrigerator and do what's called a cold rise. It would rise overnight, so we do that all the time here. We'll make the dough the first day and then we cut it and bake it the second day. So you certainly have many options in that. It has been 30 minutes to 45 minutes and I have a risen dough. And you can see how it looks a little bit different. It's got some speckles in there from the gases that have been trapped that make it rise. And so it's nice, soft, and pillowy. So from this, I want to get 10 rolls. All right, so we've got our rolls cut. And again, if you wanted to do a square roll, you can. Here at the Black Hawk, we do a circle. So you just take it and kind of fold it under and then kind of tuck it in on itself. And then we boil them because we are going to boil these in baking soda water. And it's the baking soda water that interacts with the heat of the oven that causes these to look like pretzel rolls. All right, so now we have our water ready to boil our pretzel rolls. All this is 2 quarts of water, which is 8 cups, and you add a half a cup of baking soda. I will tell you this, be careful if this is already heated and you add the baking soda because it will bubble up on you. So I always tend to add the baking soda before I've even started heating the water, and it avoids that. So just be aware that, you know, science is working here, so be careful when you add that baking soda to warm water. This is my second batch on this. So if you actually saw the water, you could see that it's starting to turn brown like our pretzel rolls. So I know it's gonna work just fine. So I'm gonna drop, I don't know, 2, 3 in at a time. Don't do too many. One, you don't wanna overcrowd your pan, as well as you don't wanna keep adding and then not know which ones should be coming out. Be patient, 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds, they need to be in there. So make sure that it is, because it will make a difference. If you don't leave them dipped in long enough, they're not gonna get as dark of a color in the oven. All right, so we're gonna take these out, strain them. And I'm gonna drop our others in. All right, so our pretzel rolls are all boiled. And then you have a couple options. So depending on what your family likes, from here you can just stay basic or traditional with the salt. That's what I'm gonna do today. But you certainly could do like a cinnamon sugar. If you wanted to do any kind of seasonings, Italian, that sort of thing, you certainly could experiment a little bit with that. And then these would go off to the oven. Now I have a convection oven here, so my cooking process is probably a little bit different than your regular home ovens. Mine are a little bit more powerful, so I have to cook mine at a little lower temperature. But cook them at the temperature that they say. If you're doing multiple pans, you might want to switch the pans so that they bake evenly, and then you'll be surprised with the color. So these go off to the oven. And then this is what you're left with. Look at that beautiful color. And this is just from baking soda. All right, this is science at its best, and man, does it taste good. So I hope you guys enjoy your pretzel rolls. You can shape them into whatever you want. I think I'm gonna go make a burger out of this one. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.